This video contains content that may be confronting.
The insidious normalisation of horror. That's how Australian doctor Thienminh Dinh describes the situation on the ground in Gaza. The emergency doctor from Brisbane is managing a team at a field hospital in the middle of the besieged enclave. She joined me earlier for her first ever TV interview, and I began by asking her what motivated her to go there at such a dangerous time. And a warning to you, this interview does contain some distressing details.
So I can probably tell you the exact moment that I decided that I needed to go. And it was during the early stages of the conflict where stories were just starting to be told of the horrors that were happening here. And there was one particular story that really shook me. And it was the story of a 6-year-old girl who was in Gaza City, and she was fleeing with her aunt and uncle and her cousins when their car came under military fire. And she watched as her aunt, her uncle and her cousins died around her. And she managed to get her phone. She called for help. And for 3 hours, she was crying. And she said, "I'm so scared. Please send help. Please come get me." And that help didn't come. And they found her body a week later in a car, riddled with bullets, and the ambulance officers that had been sent to retrieve her had also been shot and killed not too far away. And I remember hearing that story and thinking of my nephew, who was around the same age at the time. And I remember crying and thinking about how helpless and scared and alone he would have been if he had been in her situation. And in that moment, I knew that I wanted to come and help as many of these children as I could. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's necessary.
Tell us a little bit about the journey to Gaza, because there are a lot of hurdles to cross diplomatically. How did you make that journey into Gaza, and what did you see when you got there?
So we have to get approval from the Israeli authorities as well as MSF and the Gaza authorities as well. We are flown into Amman in Jordan, and from there we're escorted through to the border, through West Bank, through Israel, and then through to Gaza. There's a lot of checkpoints, and it's an entire day of travel, and the travel here is quite scary in itself. I remember crossing the border, and it just seemed like something from a dystopian novel. Not just houses, but entire neighbourhoods had just been flattened, and there was rubble. And I remember first arriving and seeing children climbing in amongst the rubble, looking for, I don't know, food or toys or their family. The trip here was horrifying.
Thienminh, just tell us a little bit about your day-to-day. What does an average day look like in the hospital for you right now?
So I am the manager of medical activities for a surgical trauma field hospital in central Gaza. Every day I start by rounding on the patients, and it's tents and tents that are filled with babies, toddlers, children, women and elderly who have just been wounded by airstrikes and shelling. The injuries that we are seeing are mainly burns, so burnt faces, burnt limbs, complex orthopedic injuries, so little babies with missing limbs. We see a lot of bullets and shrapnel injuries, so tiny bodies that have just been riddled with shrapnel and the complications that you get from that.
Do you have enough supplies?
No, we've been, even basic injuries are difficult to treat. We've been told today that we've run out completely of crate bandages. It's difficult. The situation is dire and desperate. We are rationing medication. We're rationing and reusing surgical supplies. We're rationing food, and we're rationing fuel. At the trauma hospital, I see kids who are wasting away, but on top of that, what I see is wounds that aren't able to heal because these patients don't have proteins, they don't have the vitamins, they don't have the trace elements and micronutrients needed to heal. So we are seeing what could be easily treatable injuries turn into lifelong deformities.
What do you see in the faces of the kids that you're treating?
I see the faces of my nieces and nephews, and I see the faces of Australian children. After one mass casualty incident, when it was a couple of weeks ago, when the European Gaza hospital came under attack, we received a 4-year-old girl, and her body was riddled with shrapnel. And as we were trying to save her, I couldn't help but see my niece in her face. And I wondered to myself, what if this were happening to our children and Australian children?
Thienminh, what do you want Australians to know about what you're seeing there in Gaza?
What I am seeing is the insidious normalisation of horror. I am seeing the execution of paramedics. I am seeing the bombing of hospitals. I am seeing the killing of healthcare workers. While I've been here, a number of our staff have died. I'm seeing aid being withheld from my patients.
Do you feel safe where you are?
There is nowhere in Gaza that is safe. As an example, one of my colleagues' brother was injured in an airstrike a few weeks ago. He had just completed a university assignment when an airstrike struck his house, and he had been treated at the European Gaza hospital when that hospital came under attack, and they were stuck there calling for help. There was a busload of paediatric cancer patients that had just arrived back in Gaza after receiving treatment abroad. On the first day that they arrived back in Gaza, they were attacked. There's nowhere here that is safe.